All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what is happening at this moment in the Russia-Ukraine war, we're joined by Dr. Zachary Pakin from Geneva. He is the Deputy Director of the Better Order Project at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft in Washington, D.C. Dr. Pakin, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. And let me in fact start off by asking you this. There's this proposal for a 30-day ceasefire, which a close aide of Vladimir Putin says that it gives everything to Ukraine but nothing to Russia. In your assessment, do you think the Russians would be willing to play ball with the Americans for a 30-day ceasefire? And what happens if the Russians do not agree?
Well, thank you, Mohammed, for having me on your program. I think that they will be willing to play ball, but with conditions, because Russia has a tremendous opportunity before it right now to reset its diplomatic relationship and strategic relationship with the United States. And that is a far more important thing as far as Moscow's interests are concerned than taking a few destroyed villages in eastern Ukraine at this point. So that's absolutely something that they should be willing to entertain. However, Russia has made it quite clear from the beginning of this conflict that what they're interested in is a political settlement and a more comprehensive resolution that involves not just Ukraine's neutrality, but certain changes to the European security order writ large. So Russia's not interested in a ceasefire purely for the sake of a ceasefire. If it's possible for the parties to agree on some kind of political checklist, then that might basically allow for a 30-day ceasefire to take hold, and a 30-day ceasefire is ultimately relatively short, and it would allow Russia to resume offensive operations if they so chose. If the Russians reject this out of hand, which, as I suggest, I don't think they will, there's every opportunity, of course, that President Trump will begin to view Russia as more of the problem rather than as part of the solution. We've seen what happens when President Trump turns his ire on President Zelensky. It's possible he could do the same thing towards Russia. He's quite a mercurial president, and so anything really is possible.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that he could turn his ire on Vladimir Putin pretty much in the way that he did, in the manner in which he turned his ire on Zelensky. But these are two very different individuals, because at this moment, the Russians say that they've got all the cards on the battlefield. Donald Trump says this as well. This is a war that cannot be won by the Ukrainians with the backing of NATO. With that being the case, if the Russians do not agree to a ceasefire, what action do you think Donald Trump can take? Because he's clearly said it many times over and over again that Ukraine, even with the backing of NATO and with the United States, cannot win this war.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump has said that he's going to sanction and tariff Russia if Russia doesn't play ball. The only issue is Russia is already extremely heavily sanctioned, and trade between the United States and Russia is not all that high, so tariffs really aren't going to have much of an economic impact here. And the more important thing we've seen, not just over the past 3 years, but indeed since 2014, since Russia-West relations really took a nosedive after the events that occurred in Ukraine in 2013, 2014, we've seen very clearly that sanctions are not a panacea here. You can't sanction a great power into, agreeing with you and fundamentally revising their understanding of their interests. So Russia's made it very clear that it has core security interests and political interests as relates to the shape of the European security order, and it's willing to sacrifice not just economic interests, depending on your perspective, but also, men, a significant number of men, in order to achieve the status in the European security order that it believes that it is owed as a great power. And if we haven't got that message yet, after now more than a decade of conflict in Ukraine, it would be quite a tragic outcome indeed.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Zachary Pakin, for joining us with that perspective.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.